It was a beautiful morning. Peppa woke up feeling excited about the day ahead. Little did she know something strange was about to happen. While brushing her teeth, Peppa noticed something odd. Her reflection in the mirror seemed to move just a moment after she did. At breakfast, Peppa tried to ignore the strange feeling, but every shiny surface seemed to show something different than reality. When Peppa turned on the television instead of her favorite show, she saw herself, but different. Green, stitched, and terrifying. Peppa returned to her room and slowly approached the mirror. The reflection showed a version of herself she had never seen before. The scary Peppa in the mirror spoke, "Come and play with me. This world is much more fun than yours." Against her better judgment, Peppa reached out and touched the mirror. The glass began to ripple like water. Suddenly, Peppa felt herself being pulled through the mirror. There was no turning back now. Peppa found herself in what looked like her house, but everything was darker, colder, and more frightening. In the kitchen, her family was waiting, but they were all transformed with green skin and stitches. "Welcome home, Peppa," they said. Outside, the world looked completely different. The sky was dark, the trees were twisted, and everything felt wrong. At school, all of Peppa's friends were there, but they too had been transformed. "We've been waiting for you," said Susie Sheep. Even Grandpa and Grandma Pig had been changed. They welcomed Peppa with open arms, but their smiles were unsettling. In her bedroom, Peppa looked through the mirror and saw her normal world. "I want to go back," she cried, but the transformed family and friends surrounded her. "You belong here now," they said in unison. Peppa escaped to the attic and found old mirrors showing even more frightening worlds beyond. Slowly, Peppa began to realize that maybe this world wasn't so bad after all. She was becoming one of them. Peppa joined her family in the living room, now fully transformed and accepting of her new reality. Outside their house, the family stood together. This was their home now, and they were happy. In the normal world, Peppa's bedroom stood empty. The mirror showed the scary world, but normal Peppa was nowhere to be found. Had she chosen to stay? The cursed playground. It was a dark and stormy night when Peppa Pig decided to visit the old playground behind her house. The wind howled through the twisted trees, and the rusty swings creaked ominously in the darkness. Peppa's eyes glowed with an eerie green light as she approached the abandoned slide. "I love muddy puddles," she whispered, but her voice sounded different, deeper, more sinister. The puddles around the playground weren't filled with water anymore. They were dark, thick, and bubbling with something far more terrifying. George appeared from behind the seesaw, but something was wrong. His usual cheerful demeanor was gone, replaced by hollow, red eyes that seemed to pierce through the night. "Dinosaur," he said, but the word came out as a low, menacing growl. Susie Sheep emerged from the shadows, her wool matted and stained. She carried a rusty knife in her hoof, and her smile was too wide, revealing rows of sharp, yellowed teeth. "Let's play a game, Peppa," she said with a voice like broken glass. The playground equipment began to move on its own. The merry-go-round spun faster and faster, creating a hypnotic spiral of terror. The monkey bars stretched and twisted like skeletal fingers, reaching out to grab anyone who dared to come close. Peppa laughed, but it wasn't her usual giggle. It was a sound that made the very air around them feel cold and heavy. "This is the best playground ever," she declared, as the storm clouds above them began to swirl in unnatural patterns. Rebecca Rabbit hopped out from behind the climbing frame, but her ears were torn and bleeding. Her orange dress was tattered and stained with something dark. "Want to play hide and seek?" she asked, her voice echoing strangely in the night air. The children formed a circle around the old fountain in the center of the playground. The water had long since dried up, replaced by a thick black substance that seemed to move and writhe on its own. Strange symbols appeared carved into the stone, glowing with the same eerie light as Peppa's eyes. As they joined hands, the temperature dropped even further. Their breath became visible in the frigid air, and frost began to form on the playground equipment. The wind picked up, carrying with it the sound of distant screams and whispers in languages that shouldn't exist. 1, 2, 3, they chanted together, their voices harmonizing in a way that made the ground beneath them tremble. The very fabric of reality seemed to bend and twist around their innocent game, turning something pure into something unspeakably dark. And in that moment, as the clock struck midnight, the playground was no longer just a place for children to play. It had become something else entirely, something that would haunt the dreams of anyone brave enough to remember this night.
The mirror dimension. It was a rainy evening when Peppa noticed something strange about the bathroom mirror. While brushing her teeth before bedtime, she saw her reflection acting differently than usual. The reflection smiled when Peppa frowned, and moved its hands when Peppa kept them still. At first, she thought it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But as Peppa leaned closer to examine the mirror, she realized that the reflection wasn't copying her movements at all. Instead, it seemed to be living its own life, existing in a world that looked exactly like hers but felt completely wrong. The reflection's eyes had a sinister glow, and its smile was too wide, revealing teeth that seemed sharper than they should be. Suddenly, the reflection reached out from within the mirror, its hand breaking through the glass surface like it was made of water. Peppa tried to step back, but she felt an invisible force pulling her toward the mirror. The reflection grabbed her wrist with cold, clammy fingers and began pulling her into the glass. Before she knew it, Peppa found herself on the other side of the mirror, in a world that looked identical to her own but felt fundamentally different. The colors were slightly off, the shadows moved independently, and everything had an eerie, unnatural quality. She was now in the mirror dimension, a place where everything was reversed and wrong. In this twisted version of her home, Peppa discovered that her family existed here too, but they were all wrong. Mirror George was cruel and mean, constantly plotting mischief with glowing red eyes. Mirror Mummy Pig spoke in riddles and seemed to know things she shouldn't know. Mirror Daddy Pig moved with jerky, puppet-like motions, and his laughter echoed unnaturally through the house.
Scary Peppa Pig episode that never made it on TV. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning when Peppa woke up in her bedroom, but something felt different. The sunlight streaming through her window seemed dimmer, casting strange shadows across her toys. As she walked downstairs for breakfast, she noticed that all the family photos on the wall had changed. In every picture, their smiles were too wide, their eyes too dark, and they all seemed to be looking directly at her. Mummy Pig was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with her back turned. When she finally faced Peppa, her smile stretched impossibly across her face, never wavering, never blinking. "Good morning, Peppa," she said in her usual voice, but the words seemed to echo strangely in the bright yellow kitchen. Daddy Pig sat at the table, his glasses reflecting nothing but darkness, reading a newspaper that appeared to be completely blank. George came bouncing down the stairs, clutching his beloved dinosaur toy. But as he got closer, Peppa could see that his favorite green dinosaur had changed. Its plastic eyes had turned completely black, and its mouth seemed to be frozen in a silent scream. George didn't seem to notice anything wrong, giggling and playing as if everything was perfectly normal. After breakfast, Peppa decided to visit her best friend Susie Sheep. The walk to Susie's house felt longer than usual, and the familiar neighborhood seemed somehow different. The trees were the same bright green, the sky the same cheerful blue, but shadows fell in places where there should have been sunlight. When Peppa arrived at Susie's house, she found her friend in the garden, playing with Rebecca Rabbit, Pedro Pony, and the rest of their group. They were all standing in a perfect circle, holding hands and singing a song Peppa had never heard before. As she approached, they all turned to face her at exactly the same moment, their eyes reflecting the same darkness she had seen in Daddy Pig's glasses. "Come play with us, Peppa," they said in unison, their voices creating a strange harmony. The circle of friends began to move closer,
their synchronized steps creating a rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. Peppa wanted to run, but her feet wouldn't move. The school bell rang in the distance, even though it was still morning. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had held Peppa frozen, and she found herself running toward the familiar red brick building. But as she got closer, she realized that the school was much larger than she remembered, stretching impossibly high into the sky. Inside the classroom, Madame Gazelle stood at the front, but her usual warm smile had been replaced by something that made Peppa's skin crawl. All the other children sat perfectly still at their desks, their hands folded, their eyes staring straight ahead. When evening came and the family gathered around the dinner table, they all sat in perfect silence, their food untouched, their eyes fixed on Peppa with expressions of patient expectation.
Deleted Peppa Pig episode, Peppa and the Daddy Who Didn't Come Back, right, which was never showed on TV. One day, Daddy Pig left for work in the city and promised to be home for dinner. Evening came, darkness fell outside, dinner went cold, but Daddy still hadn't returned. Mummy Pig was worried. Peppa clutched her teddy, and George quietly said, "He's nearby, but he's not the same." At midnight, the front door creaked open. "Daddy!" Peppa cried out joyfully and ran into the hallway. He was standing in the dark. Same face, glasses, beard, kind eyes. But something was wrong. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. "Hello, family," he said in a strange voice. "I've missed you so much." He started acting oddly. Didn't eat, didn't sleep, just stared into the distance. And at night, Peppa heard him talking to himself. More precisely, to the mirror. "You did well. They believed. Just a little longer now." The next morning, his eyes were pitch black, and from under his shirt, a long stretch of gray skin peeked out. Mummy Pig tried to call the doctor, but the phone wasn't working, and Daddy only said, "No need anymore. I found my true self. Daddy Pig is obsolete. Now I'm the one who breathes through walls." Then he vanished, simply melted into the hallway, leaving behind his skin, neatly folded. And that night, a familiar voice echoed through the house. "Peppa, where are you? I missed you. I want to wear you." Deleted Peppa Pig episode Peppa and the Creature Under the Bed, which was never showed on TV. One night, Peppa woke up. A cracking sound had woken her, like someone snapping a pencil, right under her bed. She listened carefully. Silence. "Maybe I dropped a toy," she told herself, but still she looked underneath. It was dark, very dark, and she saw something strange, something that couldn't be described with words, something between a pig and a person. Peppa quickly hid under her blanket. "Are you sleeping, Peppa?" whispered a voice from below. She held her breath. "If you don't answer, I'll come out." Peppa trembled. The blanket was pressed against her face. Her heart was pounding. Then, "I'm coming out." A quiet creak. Something was crawling. Under the bed. Then, next to the bed. Then, on the bed. Peppa couldn't take it anymore. She jumped up and turned on the light. The room was empty. Only a note lay by the door. "I hid better. Now it's your turn to seek." Deleted Peppa Pig episode, Peppa and the Silent Guest, which was never showed on TV. One evening, Peppa noticed that someone had tidied up her room. The toys were neatly arranged, the blanket was perfectly made, and even her drawing on the wall had been straightened. "Mummy, did you clean my room?" Peppa asked. "No, sweetheart. Maybe you forgot you did it yourself." Mummy Pig smiled, but Peppa was certain she hadn't cleaned anything. The next morning, her toothbrush was wet, even though she hadn't brushed her teeth yet. And it looked like Someone had come out of the closet. Tiny hoofprints on the floor. The door slightly ajar. On the third night, Peppa woke up because someone had jumped on her bed, but the room was empty. She turned on her nightlight and saw something on her pillow, a drawing of herself, drawn by someone else's hand. It showed her, but with a crooked smile and empty eyes. In the corner of the page, someone had written, "I live with you." "Thank you for not getting in the way," Peppa screamed. Her parents came running, but the drawing was gone. Only a torn piece of paper remained on her pillow with a tiny hoofprint on it. Since then, Peppa is afraid to sleep alone, and no one can explain who makes her bed each morning, even when she didn't sleep in it that night. Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Ceiling Virus, which was never showed on TV. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more interesting videos. It started with a cough. First Daddy Pig, then Mummy Pig. They told Peppa it was just a cold and warned her not to leave her room at night. But Peppa didn't sleep. She heard rustling and creaking from above. Not the attic, the ceiling. One night she opened her eyes and saw Mummy, but not standing. She was crawling along the ceiling, slowly, head down. Her hands clung to the plaster like spider legs. Daddy Pig followed behind her. Their eyes were white, their mouths slightly open, but they were silent. Only the scratching of their feet above. "Peppa, are you awake?" whispered Mummy, without moving her lips. Peppa pretended to sleep. In the morning, everything seemed normal, but the parents didn't eat, didn't blink, didn't laugh. And at night, they crawled again. Peppa found an old newspaper in the attic. Unknown virus turns the infected into night crawlers. Their bodies change. They hunt by sound. The last line was circled in red. "Never open your eyes if you hear movement above, even if it's your parents' voice." Now Peppa doesn't sleep. She hears something dripping from the ceiling and whispering, "You're next, Peppa." Deleted Peppa Pig episode Scribbles, which was never showed on TV. One day at school, Madame Gazelle handed out new notebooks to the children. "You can draw anything you like in them," she said. "Just take care of them. These notebooks are special." Peppa got an old, worn-out notebook. On the last page, someone had scratched, "Do not erase, do not draw jokes." Peppa just giggled. What nonsense. That evening at home, Peppa decided to test it. She drew a bunch of money, and within seconds, real bills appeared on the table, exactly like in the drawing. "Wow," Peppa froze. "It's a magic notebook." She hid it under her bed and went out the next day to play with Susie. At home, George stayed behind. He didn't know about the magic. He just wanted to draw. He opened Peppa's notebook and drew a funny, round head thing. He, George laughed. "The head thing came to eat our heads." He forgot all about the drawing. But that night, Peppa woke up to a sound, scraping, footsteps. From the darkness emerged a figure. It was the head thing, just like in the drawing, only it wasn't laughing. It was hissing. "Shh, here I come. Shh, who drew me? I eat." On a fresh page, someone had drawn Peppa with a cross over her face.